Okay, great.
So,
Thank you.
Yes, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us for our first virtual village board meeting. We have a special guest who has joined us. If you are tuning in as a member of the public, we're going to ask you to keep yourself muted, and we're going to try to have everybody's visual up on the screen that is able to, who is a member of the village staff or elected official, or any of our guests who are going to be part of the meeting. But if you want to be just watching it, you are absolutely welcome to. Just please keep yourself muted for this work session. And with that, before we get into the village business, we're very pleased to welcome County Executive George Latimer, who's going to be able to give us an update. And I would suggest that to my colleagues, while we have the meeting going on, if you could just mute yourself if you are really just going to be listening for a while, and then unmute yourself when you want to chime in. Okay, for those of us who are here.
Let's see my picture.
I don't see your picture either. So let me see where you are, Rika. That's because Rika's iPhone says, I'm going to ask you to start video. That work? There's Rika. Rika, I would suggest you turn your phone landscape-wise. Then you'll feel better. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and George Latimer is with us by phone. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I appreciate it very much to be with you. And I have Ellen Hendricks on the line as well, who is our Assistant Director of Intergovernmental Relations. I know you've got a busy schedule, so I'll try to be quick. I wanted to give you a quick update on where we are with the COVID issue, and then open it to any questions you'd like to ask, and then I'll let you get on to the business at hand. We're obviously in an area that none of us have had any experience in dealing with, so the county is trying to work as closely as we can with the towns, the villages, and the cities, and then in turn with the state to try to deal with an issue that we're watching play out around the world that is pretty horrific, and we're hoping that somehow our preparations will reduce the damage here when it comes knocking on our door. You all know that we have identified, the governor made this announcement earlier today, 30,800 cases of COVID-19 in New York State that are tested positive. Now, there are many more that were tested negative, but that positive number is much higher than any place else in the country. And Westchester County has the second highest in the state with 4,700 cases, slightly below that. New York City, of course, has more than we do. We were one of the first counties to jump out with a number of cases based on an incident with an individual in New Rochelle who infected a group of people that was part of his religious institution. But what's most important to note is that we have done more testing per capita in Westchester County than any county in the nation. So with that situation comes positives in absolute numbers that are very high. You're aware that we have a testing center that's been open almost 2 weeks down in Glen Island, county land that we turned over to the state for that purpose. There is a testing center at the Westchester Medical Center over in Valhalla. We understand that St. John's Hospital in Yonkers has started testing. There may be some other ones that are happening on a larger basis. But we're dealing with a virus that doesn't have a vaccine for it and doesn't have an antiviral treatment. So the tools that we have is to test, isolate those that test positive, and try to have them work through the virus over the 2-week period of incubation, and then deal with those who are sick and provide as much health care as we can. The percentages that we hear from around the world is 80% of the people that get the virus will fight it off with their natural antibodies. They might be lightly sick, but it won't be serious. 20% of the people will get seriously sick. Most of that 20% might be at some point in time or another hospitalized. And then of that 20%, a quarter of that, or 5% of the total population, will find themselves in severe situation, perhaps in an ICU setting. When we look at the overall situation of Westchester County, we have 3,000 hospital beds in the county and 160 ICU beds. And if you project where we are today, we're about 5,000 cases. If you have 5,000 cases and this was as high as it was going to get, then we assume 1,000 of that 5,000 would be sick enough to be hospitalized. 3,000 beds give us enough. But if a quarter of that 1,000, 250 people, need ICU concerns, we have 160 beds. So we would be short in that area. And of course, we haven't maxed out. We're still in the process of growing the number of cases as we test individuals. This virus is extremely contagious and has been doing the rounds everywhere. When we look at the list of different communities, it generally tracks population. So the larger cities, the top 5 communities in the county are the population, are the top 5 with COVID cases. New Rochelle and Yonkers, both over 200 cases. Greenberg, with its villages, 125 or so. And then it peters down from there. Ossining overall has 54 cases, the majority of which are in the village, and a smaller number of them are in the town outside. We're trying to keep your mayor directly informed every day of what the numbers are, and the press will ask us for them. We'll release them, but we're not in a position to release individual information about individual people. It's most important that your police, fire, and EMS have the information they need so that they're going to respond to somebody's home. They know whether that person is positive or not, and that information is being provided through our 60 control function for fire and for EMS. Our Emergency Operations Center in Hawthorne is the clearinghouse for all requests for personal protection equipment, known as PPEs, and hand sanitizer. And the requests that come from the villages through the towns go to the county. County gets the stuff from the state, and we redistribute it. We just had a cargo load come in from Albany late today, and our plans are to redistribute it tomorrow. And if you have requests on that grouping for Ossining Village, then hopefully they'll be in your hands tomorrow, and we'll continue the process going forward. That is part of our county function. Our county department health nurses are out doing testing as well as the centers, and that is really taking a lot of the energy of our health department in concert with the state health department. The teams, and there's a number of them, probably test in the aggregate about 100 people a day. So when you add up the different testing models, we are doing a lot of testing, and we also have to use some of that testing for people who've completed their period of time in isolation, having tested positive. If they don't have any symptoms, then they get tested. If they're at that point prepared to, then we release them back to their normal work. Our Beeline bus system has eliminated fares during this crisis, and we're reconfiguring the passenger seating to eliminate the first few rows behind the driver. So that when you go onto a Beeline bus, if you're going up Route 9 and you ride the bus or any of the other routes through Ossining, you go in through the back door. You do not come in contact with the driver. You do not have to pay. And the benefit of that is we're protecting the drivers from incidental contact with people that may be positive. If our bus driver fleet becomes ill, then we can't run the buses. So we have to protect the bus drivers, and that's the method we're using now at the county level. All of our parks are still open. We are encouraging social distancing at all of those parks. And of course, you've got plenty of parks, north of you and south of you in a number of different areas. We have kept open the 6 county golf courses, including Hudson Hills. Now, some people react negatively to that, but golf is a sport that is not contact. You don't, interact with each other in close personal positions. If you space at the tee box and if you space on the green, if you take one person per cart and drive around that way, a foursome or a threesome can play their round of golf and not get up close and personal. That's not the way, unfortunately, basketball or touch football or rugby or some of the other sports are played. So we are keeping open the golf courses, although we are closing certain set areas. We're closing children's playgrounds, which seems very unfair, but we can't sanitize the playground after every use. So when a child touches it and another child touches it a few seconds later, there's no way to guarantee that there may not be COVID on it. So we've had to close down, unfortunately, the children's playgrounds at the county parks. But the parks are open. So many things are closed. People will have difficulty just staying in their houses all the time. If they're healthy and they can go out, we want to at least give some opportunity for recreation to the best of our ability. We know that all of this represents a big economic hit to all of our merchants. It affects individuals, business owners, small business owners, large corporations. Our Director of Economic Development, Bridget Gibbons, is working on a variety of different strategies to help identify programs that could help our business community. She's working through the Chamber of Commerce. She's got a couple of webinars scheduled for next week and some announcements. And we're also keeping a close eye on the stimulus packages that are being debated in Washington, because there's supposed to be money in both of the 2 houses resolutions, which still have to be worked out and harmonized, but to get them to work in harmony and then release some funds which would be sorely needed on the streets of Ossining Village from the businesses and from the individuals. So we're hoping that that will happen. But, you know, we're working on economic development issues. However, we believe that the science tells us we have to limit the amount of public contact until we're through this, and we're not by any means through it. And if we were to open prematurely, we'd be doing something very dangerous. We'd be running the risk of infection over a wider group of people who would think that they're in the clear. We're going to work with the state on New York Forward, which is the governor's plan to help restart the businesses and so forth. We have a hotline, 211, that's in effect. It's jammed with phone calls. People routinely talk about how tough it is to get through. So we have also created an email for questions about the COVID, and we put things up on our website in English and Spanish and Chinese so that people can have some basic questions answered. If you do want to send a question to the hotline, to the email address, it's COVID-19 FAQ, frequently asked questions, at westchestergov.com. COVID-19 FAQ at westchestergov.com. And any of these numbers and email addresses are all online. If anybody wants to contribute anything or volunteer their time to help us in what were the tasks ahead of us, then they can do so with a different email address, icanhelp, ICANHELP, at westchestergov.com. We have set aside the county center, turned it over to the state to set up temporary hospital beds that would back up our regular beds. And when this surge comes, as has been seen in other countries, and we get the peak amount of infection, we may need lots of folks to help us out, and we hope that that will happen. Just to summarize, before we go to questions, the whole mission here is to try to keep the degree of contagion down to a manageable level where our healthcare system can handle it and reduce the amount of fatalities. If we spike, if many more people get ill at the same time because the virus has spread and our health system can't address all of the people, if we don't have enough ventilators, if we don't have enough protective equipment for the doctors and nurses and they get sick, we will have a disaster on our hands. We're seeing it in Italy. It's starting to be seen in Spain. It was already seen in China. And our country is one that we pride ourselves on our individual spirit, our individual movement. But in this particular case, if we don't modify our behavior, if we don't use discipline and prudence, we will have a disaster. We're going to try our very best not to have that disaster.
Thank you very much, County Executive Latimer. I've just unmuted myself. Anybody else who's on the screen here, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask the County Executive while he's here with us.
Any questions? I'm happy to try to answer if I can.
How do you want to do this, Victoria? Should we just say that we want to speak, or do you want to do it in some order?
Go right ahead, Rika.
Okay. Thank you for coming, and thank you for doing this across the municipality. I think it's a refreshing change from what we've seen in the past, and it's always a pleasure to have you join us, even in this sort of awful time. So I don't know if I have direct questions, but just some observations. Sure. A lot of what is being talked about, rightfully so, is about the economy, the health of the individual, the health of the economy, jobs, and you refer to that. If I could just ask you, oftentimes the not-for-profits have been not mentioned in the conversation. They are, I think, if I have it right, produce well over 58,000 jobs in Westchester, and their largest source of jobs, paid jobs, not to mention the tenfold to that of volunteers that work with not-for-profits. And in a lot of the material that I looked at, there's a talk about small business going forward. They're going to need a lot of help, and corporations. Some things do include not-for-profits, others don't. So I would appreciate that someone in government keep an eye on that sector as well.
We are including, Rika, in all of our efforts, the not-for-profit community alongside the for-profit business community. You're absolutely right. They're major employers. They're going through a very difficult situation as well. The services they provide that we contract for are essential services that they provide better than we would if we were tasked with doing it directly. So you're correct, and we're trying to keep them as part of it. If I neglected to mention them positively, I should have, and you're right to include them in the discussion.
Yeah, more about the loans, not you. You've actually been speaking about them. I actually follow your stuff. But when things come down from the governor's office, loans that will be available, grants, whatever, that would be great. A sector that is near and dear to me because of my full-time job at the JCC is that the school sector has been looked at with some ups and downs, teachers, employment, students, families, but we also have a lot of special needs kids, especially where I work, in the nonprofit that I work for. And it seems that virtual learning does not help children with special needs or their families. And I'm not asking you personally, but it would be great if somebody in your office at your level and even higher would look at that sector and how they might be helped beyond non-for-profits helping them, but with some material help, because these children already in about 10 days are having major setbacks.
Very good point, and we'll duly note it and make sure that there's a connection there.
Again, I think you guys are doing a great job. I just thought I would take the opportunity to bring it to your attention for at least these two topics here in Westchester. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rika.
While we have the county executive here, does anybody else have any questions or comments for him about what's happening on the county level? I know our staff has regularly been participating in calls, and it's been a really great opportunity for each municipality to learn from each other and to figure out how we can share ideas. This is constantly evolving for all of us. So if there's anybody from staff or elected officials who'd like to ask the county executive a question, I'd ask you to do so. Otherwise, I'm sure he has 40 other communities he needs to be checking in on.
Just 3 more tonight, that's all.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
I do. County Executive Latimer, this is Omar Lopez talking, a trustee here in Ossining. My internet is a little bit unstable, so if you have some trouble hearing me, let me know. I'm grateful for you, Echo Rika, being on the line and coming to speak with us. My question is about targeting specific communities, particularly the Spanish-speaking community and young folks. What are the messages that you are finding can be most effective in helping folks to understand the context of what we are in, so that they feel compelled to stay at home?
Well, I think that we're looking at statistics, Omar, that do show that young people can contract the disease. It is a much more deadly contagion for those who are older and with compromised immune systems, although there are people of all age that have asthma issues and perhaps COPD. So there are vulnerable people at all different ages. But we also understand that there's a sort of a perception that young people are not affected by the disease, and unfortunately that is not the case, so it does affect them. And we're also dealing with the fact that from the economic side, the shutdown of the economy, including hourly wage jobs, gig jobs in the industry, affect younger people more than it does other people at other ages. So I was trying to put together some strategies to get us through this and then reboot the economy when we're ready to reboot the economy. We don't want to do it prematurely. We think resonates with young people. But one of the obvious realities is, for those of us of any age, we were all once young, and the social connections of people in that age category sort of, dominate your thinking and your time and energy to be with other young people, to enjoy the joy of being youthful and the things that you do. Oftentimes means that they don't follow current affairs as much as you do when later in life you start to own property or you have children and you're rooted in a community in a different way. So we're trying to use, the fact that our materials are translated in different languages to reach people, make it more convenient for them if their native language is a different one. We're trying, as we are with the census right now, which I think is probably the single biggest thing that we're trying to promote within those communities, is that signing up for the census and being tracked is an important way for us to get the benefits financially and representative, legally, political representation-wise that are important. But it is tough, and we are on social media to the extent that we can connect. We have to try to make our messages interesting and eye-catching because there's so many messages out there, and if it looks like it's standard stuff, people in a certain category will delete it. But we're trying, and, we can always do better. And if you have any suggestions for us, we're all ears.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else? Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you very much and let Mr. Latimer move on to his next community of the evening. All right. County Executive Latimer, thank you so much for joining us and for being so attentive and on top of things. It's constantly evolving and really being mindful of every segment of our community and every community. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Trustees, have a nice night.
You
Take care.
too.
Bye-bye.
So
Good
with
night,
that-
everybody.
Good night, Ellen. Thank you. So with that, we will transition to our regularly scheduled village board meeting. Welcome to our first virtual village board meeting. It is March 25th. We began the meeting at just about 7:30 p.m. Many of us who are here on the screen, if you're viewing us, are generally working remotely because our positions allow us to, and that's the best thing you can possibly do if you're able to stay home and keep yourself and others safe. That's what we should be doing as much as possible. But there are many members of village staff who report to work each day, and we need them to keep us safe and to keep our community operating. And so thank you very much to everyone in village government and throughout the community that is performing essential work on behalf of keeping our community and our society functioning even during this very challenging time. Each day there are new updates and new projections of what to anticipate. And there is some good news. We just had the county executive on the phone, and many of us are viewing the governor's reports each day. And I was very pleased to see that in Westchester, we have slowed the rate of infection. And that's good news. It means social distancing is working. And Westchester, because we were on the forefront, we were one of the first communities, one of the first counties in the country to see the rates of infection that we are a model for the rest of the country. And so it's good news that all of these interventions that are making our lives so very inconvenient are actually serving a purpose and having the desired effect. So thank you to everyone who is practicing social distancing as you are. As the county executive updated us, we are not in Ossining immune to the coronavirus. And we have several members of our community who have tested positive. And the reality is there are surely many, many more members of our community who have just not been tested, who may have very mild symptoms or asymptomatic. And so while our first responders are provided with more information than the general public so that they can take extra precautions if they are going to be in contact with someone who is known to have tested positive, we should all assume that everyone you encounter is
Mark?
likely. Could you mute yourself here? I'll mute you.
Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay. No, it's fine. You should take every precaution when you meet someone or engage with someone, and just assume that they may be infected and just don't know yet, or aren't showing symptoms yet, or maybe they won't show symptoms. And so that is why we are all practicing social distancing, and it's why all of our hands are so dry from washing them so much and using so much hand sanitizer. For now, local, county, and state parks remain open for individual activities, no group activities. We heard the county executive saying that golf is allowed, so I guess that's considered an individual activity. We don't have golf courses in Ossining anyway, so that's a moot point here on the village level, but as was acknowledged, our playgrounds are closed, our fields are closed to group activities, but we to encourage people who are not experiencing any symptoms at the moment to go out, take a walk, have a run, go for a bike ride, and engage with people who are in your household, but not with others. Keep 6 feet of distance, as I know we have all been hearing, and we can't say it enough because it is critical for us to be able to continue this slowing of the infectious rate. Ossining schools, like every other school right now, is now fully engaged in distance learning. The families are figuring it out. I don't imagine that I'm all that much better or worse off than most families who are trying to figure it out with their middle school children. And there aren't too many tears that have been shed yet, and they may have learned a thing or two, and we'll see how the next week goes. It's a work in progress for us all. The schools remain closed at this time, and there is not a date certain of when, if the school closures are going to be extended, and we'll just wait to see what the school district decides or what the state decides. There are a lot of things that are constantly evolving and to be determined, including the elections. It's the next election we're supposed to have is April 28th, which is the presidential primary. Albany is figuring out if there will be perhaps a consolidation of election days, if there will be an expansion of access to absentee ballots. So we'll wait and see about that. It is important that our democracy continues to function. So we'll hope that the folks in Albany figure that out, as well as figuring out a budget. Their budget is due April 1st. I am told by folks who work in Albany that while they may pass something in by April 1st, it's likely that once they have more information about what the numbers are going to look like this year, that perhaps in a few more months they'll pass another supplemental budget. And I just want to remind everyone something else that's going to continue to happen this year, regardless of what's happening with the coronavirus, and that is Census 2020. And this year, if there is ever a reason to know why it is important to have accurate representation in government and the appropriate amount of funding from higher levels of government, this is it. Please respond to the census letter that you got in the mail. I've gotten 2 already. I better hurry up and take care of it. Otherwise I'm going to get even more, and then you're going to get phone calls. When you open up your mail, it says Census 2020, and there's a code that you go online, and you can go online. You can do it by phone or by mail, and there are many languages available online and by phone. If English is not your native language, I encourage not only your household, but anyone you know to please, please, please respond to that. And with that, I will say there are 2 things I want to remind you of that you can find on the Village website. One of them is regular updates with lots of links and resources related to COVID-19. Thank you very much to Jamie Hoffman for making sure that that stays up to date. We send out emails periodically with updates and lots of links, and all of the information that we send out by email is housed on that page, as well as links to other resources that have been provided to us by state, county, and federal agencies. So there's a lot of information there, and if you go to thevillageofossining.org, you will see right at the top of the quick links is the link that takes you to that page. The other important page is the Census 2020. There's a cute little icon that says Ossining Counts, and that is our census page. And in fact, that was recently updated because the census is figuring out how they can still have an accurate count, even with folks, for example, one of the questions that came up this week was college students that were living in their college dorms 3 weeks ago and expected to be there on April 1st, which is Census Day, are actually going to be home. But there's also, if you are in that situation, then I'm not even going to give you the details because I don't want to misspeak, and I want to have you go to our website, go to thevillageofossining.org, go to the Ossining Counts page, and you can get all the information about the census there. And one other update I will provide, you'll see that 4 members of the Village Board are tuned in tonight. Our fourth trustee, the missing member, is Bob Fritchie, and I just got an update from him. He's doing pretty well. He expects to be home tomorrow. As you are aware, he had some surgery recently, and this is a follow-up to that. And it's also an unfortunately very good reminder for us that as the hospitals are seeing an increase in folks who are dealing with the coronavirus, people still have other health concerns as well. And we want to make sure that everyone who needs the medical attention that our hospitals can provide is able to get the access that they need. And so our thoughts are with Bob Fritchie, and we look forward to hearing an update from him tomorrow. And I am very pleased to report that New York State is generally seeing a slowing of the hospitalization, and that's good news. So we are all doing our very best to practice social distancing, and it is working. As frustrating as it is, and wish we knew that when it was going to end, but it is working, and that is good news. Okay, so with that, we do have a full agenda, but I would like to open it up to any trustees who would like to offer any comments or updates before we enter the formal agenda for this evening. Is there anybody who would like to say something?
Well, I'm sorry, Omar, are you going to start as usual?
Go for it, Rika.
Oh, no, I want to stay constant. Go ahead.
So, Madam Mayor talked about the census, and that.
We lost you.
And you're
You're
already
going in and
home.
out a little
You
bit.
have your um, fill out the census. Am I good? Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay, great. Fill out the census and wash your hands and social distance.
We lost you again, Omar.
It's his internet connection.
It's my internet connection. Everybody's online.
Yeah.
Rika, take it away.
So the segue that was done before is how some things still go, even with all this awfulness. I just wanted to, in addition to what was said, there's so much online. It occurred to me a few days ago that this is the first pandemic and first sort of global virus that's gone during the internet age. And you could see the internet is just overflowing with information. Probably nothing I can add to that. So I'm going to go local. The announcement I want to make is I was speaking to Ms. Morona by email. She's working remotely at the high school. Did not get a lot of requests for scholarships. I think everybody's so overwhelmed with coronavirus. For the kids that need to go to college, if you've got kids going to college next year, or people are going, they have scholarships available at the high school, still available, even though some of the due dates may have passed, they're still accepting. I want to just remind people, my mom had passed away at about this week. 3 years ago, we opened up a Sarah Levin Scholarship through the Lions. The Lions also has the Joseph Trachtenberg Scholarship and the Ernest and Ann Klotz Scholarships. They're looking for more applicants. They have some, but they're going to extend the dates. And I hope that people apply to those monies that are available for them for a college. They're for Ossining high school kids exclusively. So please remind your kids to go for it, because I expect them all to be going to college. For those that want to go to college and can't go to college, I hope that this money helps them. And they do have other scholarships. I just did not get from Ms. Morona all of the names. I apologize, but she will have them if she's contacted. And that was all for me. I mean, the world seems to go on, but there are so many great things in our Austin communities. The list is so long. I know that Jamie's been keeping on top of the website of all the great outreach programs, food deliveries, helping the elderly, et cetera, and Phelps and all sorts of programs going on. It's just part of the joy of living in this community. It's just been overwhelming for me to see everybody trying to help their neighbor. That's it for me.
Thank you.
May I?
Please.
Great, thank you. I just want to take a moment to thank actually our staff from every single department in our village, from DPW, from the building department, from the police department, the fire department, definitely everybody that works on the second floor. They have done a fantastic job. I think even the people that are working remotely have, just to keep the village business going, I think is something that I'm very proud of what they have accomplished working. I know how hard it is working from home, is definitely a challenge, trying to figure out how many hours do you actually do work. And I think I do a lot more work at work than I actually do at work, just to try to keep up with the family and everything else. So I really want to thank you for all the hard work that everybody's been doing for our community here. So thank you so much for that.
So Karen, before we start talking about the event policy, you are the head of our emergency management team. Is there any update that you'd like to provide for us about how things are progressing?
I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, trustees. Thank you, Trustee Quesada, for recognizing the staff. The staff is doing amazing work. Everybody is rising to the occasion. We are doing a lot of things to keep our staff safe. We are complying to the degree possible with having people work from home who can work from home. Obviously, that there are some tasks that require people to be physically present, and we're doing our best to stagger those staffs to make sure that people are social distancing while they're working so that we can maintain our sanitation services and our other services. as effectively as possible. And right now, knock wood, we have not had to cut any services, and we're able to maintain things as per usual because of the hard work everybody's been doing and because of the pre-planning that went into this. We are continuing to have Office of Emergency Management meetings with the town and with the police department, the fire department, first responders. We'll be having them every Friday from now on. Touch base. We do have issues in our community. As many of you know, our first responders right now, our police department, I think is pretty good on masks, but we do have a community health center that desperately needs supplies. That's Open Door Community Health Center. They are an extremely valuable asset to our community, especially being on the front lines of public health. So anything we can do to help them through this most difficult time for the valuable service they provide, just continue to just, if you know anybody, reach out. They need your resources, as all our hospitals and medical facilities do. Hopefully the slowing in the infection will mean that we won't reach the most critical worst case. But again, things are pretty difficult for everybody. So as we go on, we do have some nice things happening. Maddie Zahat and Jamie Hoffman have done a great job of organizing our feeding program with Feeding Westchester, our food distribution program. So every week we're giving out 900 bags of food to produce and proteins and all sorts of things to people who need them in our community with Feeding Westchester. Maddie has been sidelining doing volunteer recruitment and organization, and it's been going very well with, of course, the help of our staff at the Recreation Department under the oversight of Bill Garrison. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to Legislator Borgia, Catherine Borgia, who's, I think, been there at every event we've had distributing food, Star of Bethlehem Church too, as well as Austin Cap, Matt Galata, and many others who have volunteered on that front. This is a community that comes together when comes together for good times, but certainly when things are tough, it comes together too. So it's quite wonderful to see. Again, we're taking a lot of steps. Our buildings are being sanitized every week, so I have to give a big shout out to John Heitman and our maintenance department for making sure that those who do come to work are as protected as possible. And again, we're going to just keep working and keep everything going forward as to the best that we can for the foreseeable future. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so if we're going to move on with the formal agenda, Karen, do you want to introduce what we're going to talk about?
I do.
The event policy. It's a good one.
I do. So as many of you may recall, we had a lot of discussions in 2019 when I first started about events, and we realized that there were a lot of inconsistencies to our event policy, and a lot of our event policies hadn't been really reviewed in years. And the event landscape has changed, and we have lots and lots of different types of events, parades, processions, fairs, festivals, you name it, more and more every year, and people wanting to do things, wanting to celebrate Ossining. And I am hoping that very soon we get to do that again. But we will be ready when we get to that point, because Jamie Hoffman and Bill Garrison have been working quite extensively over the last several months, interviewing our event stakeholders, talking to different people, different codes and processes, and really striving to make this as streamlined, as effective as possible. So we are I'm deeply indebted to them for the work they've done, because when we get event season going again, and we will be doing it in a far more equitable, efficient, and streamlined way that I think will actually make our events work better individually and synergistically to really help create and drive local economy. So we're really looking forward to that point. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Jamie Hoffman, who's going to give some detail about the process, and Bill Garrison, who will also fill you in on our recommendations, and our Corporation Counsel, who will talk about some of the code changes that will be required. So,
Thanks, Karen, and thank you, Mayor and Board of Trustees. Special events are an important aspect of the Village of Ossing's overall vitality. From festivals and fairs to parades and athletic events, the Village of Ossining is proud to host several of each annually. It's our goal to enhance the quality of life and economic prosperity of Ossining through the support of special events in our village. The focus of this review is to evaluate special events held within the Village of Ossining. This review was conducted between, as Karen said, between November of last year and March of this year, and was limited to assessing the current special events policies of the village, comparing the village costs with other municipalities, and developing recommendations for a new policy. We're seeking a policy that strikes the most desirable balance between minimizing economic impacts while growing capacity and community support. Special events in the village sometimes involve neighborhood groups, nonprofit organizations, and for-profit organizations who obtain permits to use village-owned property. The village subsidizes most of the costs for all special events. Historically, this was done as a way to encourage local events to take place in Ossining as part of an overall effort to improve quality of life and support ongoing community development efforts. While the village's process for administering special event applications aligns with our neighboring communities, the fees the village charges for these events reflect an out-of-date system that are not consistent with many of those municipalities. This is because there is no direct correlation between our current fees and the actual impact of an event has on the village in terms of costs, staff, and material resources. Bill and I have reached out to a number of different communities and have researched online communities across the country for getting ideas for their event policies, their guidelines, their permitting, and how they do it. And I'm going to actually throw it over to Bill to talk about how we handled our stakeholder meetings, to hear how the community handled hearing about the information and what their feedback was.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. We've had a stakeholders meeting, and it went really well because we got a lot of good input from people. One of the things that came up was that a lot of our events, large events, are held right in the village, not in the park, like the village fair, other ones, which causes some road closures and impacts the businesses. So that was one thing that we want to be considerate of as we move forward and when we're trying to identify as we're working to plan for special events. So it became parking issues. We wanted to make sure that how we determine who should, where these areas should be, where the special events should be. So if they should be in parks or should they be in Market Square or parking lots. Let's see, what else do we have here? We spoke to, as Jamie said, a lot of some of our neighbors to find out what was going on and what was happening in their municipalities. One of the things that we quickly found out was that a lot of local municipalities do not have any formal process for special events. We found that Peekskill and Beacon, which are communities that do have a lot of special events, do have a special event application. We want to go further and recommend that we have an application as well as a guide so that when people are coming to do events here in Ossining, that they are aware of what the responsibilities are, what the requirements are going to be up in advance. We also looked at the, we found that one of the things that was kind of across the board that all the communities are doing is a requirement of insurance. And this is something that prior to 2019 was not always being followed. The insurance was not being required of organizers doing special events. So we're happy to report that that is occurring now and will continue to go forward. We also found that there is some fees for use of parks in other communities. We don't have fees for the use of our parks other than fees that are established for use of ball fields. So that is something to consider as we move forward as well. Another issue was about the cost, and Jamie had mentioned this, of to the village for these events that are occurring. A lot of these costs are mainly overtime costs for police, DPW, recreation and parks, and other staff. We found that most of the other municipalities are passing along this overtime staffing costs to the event organizers. We also found that a majority of the municipalities do not have they're not interested in having a process. Well, they are interested in having a process, and they're very interested in what we're doing. They want us to, are very interested in getting a look at our guide once we get it published, to see how they can change things within their communities. A lot of the things that are going on in the other communities is it goes to the village manager or the town administrator, and it's handled through that, and there's no formal process. Other communities like Sleepy Hollow Recreation tries to partner with almost all their event organizers that are coming in. So it's really hard to compare community to community because it is quite different. So some of the things that I had pointed out earlier are some of the things that are consistent. Do we want to get into some of our recommendations?
Sure. I did want to talk about a couple of things which are important to take note of. We currently, in our codes right now, we currently only have in our codes for events for parades and processions. We actually don't have a code for block parties, moving athletic events, that's sort of what I'm calling any kind of race, walk, what have you, street closings, and any other kind of special events. We've really been using the parades and processions as sort of a guideline for that. And then also I wanted to bring your attention to, the amount of money that we spend every year, at least in 2019, most of it was, if you take a look at the document I sent you, it's got the costs that we spent. And then I also think it's important that Stuart talks about different items like alcohol and the process, and as far as like managing it would go. So right now the process really is, it goes through a special event application that goes through the recreation department, but and then it goes to the village manager's office, and it sort of is not the one stop that the community is looking for. And we're recommending that while the village manager will have sign off on everything, that it moves under recreation for mostly everything that would take place, because it's an event, and most things that are taking place on village owned property need to be managed by one space, because if you're having the manager have to review all of the minutia, it takes away from the conversations that the recreation department can have with them, and it would give an opportunity for the event producer to have one person to talk to who has the answers and has the capacity to do that. So I was going to hope that Stuart can talk about some of that.
Just before that, I just want to add, I think it's important because one of the things, the goals for this was to make the whole process easier for the event organizer. That was one of the things that I had heard from people who were trying to do events here, was they didn't know what was required of them. And as the event was being organized, it was kind of being put together as a piecemeal. So this is something that's going to help us as well as the event organizers. So that information is in advance of trying to get 2 months into planning the event and finding out, oh, I need insurance, and they don't have insurance, or they don't know where to get it. So all that stuff is going to be up front.
And they'll have all of that information from the event packet that they're going to get. Once the application packet will be available on the website, so people will be able to review it and be able to call us and say what if they have questions with regards to the process or what's necessary for everything. But by creating an event packet that has all the guidelines in it, it evens the playing field so that everyone is in the community who applies to do an event gets to be treated equally, and they get to speak to the exact same people that everybody else gets to speak to. And it works through the cogs of the process.
Jamie, thank you so much. Bill, thank you. Before we talk more specifically about the codes, I do want to say that I do want to, again, recognize Jamie and Bill for doing an enormous amount of research and reaching out to the community with individual meetings with event producers and stakeholders, and doing a very well-attended stakeholder meeting with about 60 people who came from all walks of life in Ossining, business owners, nonprofits, events producers, religious organizations, and others, as well as representatives of our staff and the police department who participate and support events. One of the really great things about this is we really will have that one-stop shopping resource that will be able to guide somebody through exactly what they need. It will absolutely streamline the process. And I think once we make some of the code adjustments that we need to make, again, when we get to event season, which we hope is soon, we are going to really be able to have some, facilitate the events for the event producers, but also make it easier on the village, less burdensome on the village, and make sure that these events do what they're supposed to do in driving people to Ossining, to shop, to play, to see how great it is, and really benefit as many community residents as possible. So thank you both for doing that.
I guess I'll chime in now. Good evening, everybody, and thank you.
Good evening, Stuart.
Interestingly enough, a number of municipalities in the western part of the state in particular, over the past few years, have begun to adopt special event ordinances or local laws. But in fact, in our area, the town of Pauling did it just about 5 months ago. What's important is that they actually include a definition of what is a special event, which would include block parties, races, what a lot of them refer to as walkathons, fairs, things like that. So one of the things I think that's important is, as Jamie pointed out, we currently have essentially just a parade and assembly code section. I think what would be best is if instead it becomes a section called effectively special events. And within that special event section, what you would have would be the process for getting the permits, how the permit is obtained, who the permit is obtained from, what the review process is. Many of these ordinances, and I'll be providing a memo to all you folks, are very detailed as to what factors are to be considered in terms of it being a special event. And also what has to be considered in terms of granting or denying the permit request. But what's interesting is in a significant number of the municipalities, the event needs to have a charitable component to it, meaning that, in fact, if you look at the town of Southampton, they actually require that you put the benefactor or the entity that is getting the money or most of the money on the application. And the person who is running the event must, at the end of the event, submit basically a canceled check to the town showing that they have paid their money to the particular entity. One of the questions will be how we want to define a special event. What you generally find is it's a special event is an event that takes place on public property or on private property that involves some aspect of public property, or what they like to call support services being police, DPW, fire, things like that. As Bill pointed out, in most municipalities, there is a chargeback procedure where effectively what you do is the departments will chime in and say, well, we think it's going to take X number of police officers, or it's going to take this amount of DPW. And that can actually be added to the cost for the particular entity that wants to do the event. The insurance provisions are fairly uniform throughout most of the municipalities. If there is alcohol, there is an additional insurance request that is made for that particular alcohol coverage that might be provided. Obviously, all the food vendors have to have their county licenses. In some of the municipalities, in addition to the sponsor procuring the license and getting the insurance, the individual vendors have to be licensed. I know that's something Jamie, Bill, and I have talked about in terms of whether that's needed or not. And they define who those vendors are. One thing that's very important for all participants to know is that even if they are getting the license, that does not remove their obligation to get all other permits that they are otherwise required to get, be they anything that the village would require, anything that the county might require, anything that the state might require. If they need, for example, a tent permit or something like that, those still have to be done and handled. But having looked at a number of these ordinances throughout the state, they provide a good template, I think, that we will be able to use as to when permits are required and not. I can tell you, for example, the city of Jamestown, to our extreme west in the state, just revised their ordinance. And one of the things that they did is that they specifically exempted block parties. And interestingly, with block parties, what you find with most locales is that you have to have some evidence that people on the block actually want to have the party. So be it that they have to provide signatures from all the people or what have you. Since we're looking to have this through the Recreation Department, the notice provisions probably are not as applicable in some other municipalities where the permit is granted by the board. Generally, what has to happen is the sponsor has to provide notice within a certain radius, particularly if the event is to be held in a residential zone, which is generally not the case with the events that we have here. Clearly, the big issue is closing off the streets, making sure that things are safe. The police would always be given the ability, if they felt it necessary during the course of the event, to curtail the event or in fact cancel the event if there was some significant issue with regard to safety. But from a code perspective, putting all the events under one umbrella, so to speak, and laying out the procedure, laying out the insurance requirements, laying out the requirement for a hold harmless agreement with the specific language in the code as to what that hold harmless agreement must say, will be very important and can then also be put directly into the application and the guide so that everyone knows what they will require. So defining the special event, defining the application process, specifically telling the applicant what they must provide is important. And that can be from, depending on the size of the event, means of ingress and egress, the number of vendors you're expecting, to questions, where are your food vendors going to be? All those different kind of things become important. And as long as the vendor or the sponsor knows that he or she or it has to provide that information at the get-go, it will make the process move that much faster. Thank you.
Thank you to all the staff who have put so much time and effort into helping us to have an events policy that not only makes sense and really ensures that there's fairness and there's consistency in how anybody who wants to organize an event in the community is able to apply for it and really understands what we're asking for. I know this is an awful lot of work, and you reached out to so many different communities to learn from their experience. And it sounds like if we can figure this out, then we're going to become a model for other communities. So we love that when we're the leaders on that. So thank you so much, Jamie and Bill, who have really taken this very seriously, and you've brought a lot for us to consider. I've written a bunch of notes, but I'd like to open it up to Karen. Is there anything else you want us to be aware of? Otherwise, I'll have the trustees start asking questions or commenting. Oh. Okay, you're saying no. Okay.
I'm sorry. I couldn't figure out where the mute thing was.
Muted. There you go.
Yeah. Please ask questions.
Okay, so
I will start. So thank you to Jamie and Bill and Stuart and Karen and Maddie and everyone who contributed to this effort. Why not? This is a big deal and matters a lot. Questions on my end. One, is there a differentiation made in any way by the nature of the sponsor, if it is a for-profit, is a business submitting, or a nonprofit or a religious institution?
Actually, there's not. The way that this works and guidelines that we've gotten from NICOM is events are events are events. So when what we're trying to do is make them as equitable as possible, and also keep costs reasonable. But there really is not a way to fairly start delineating based on the fact that we're not doing this as a for-profit entity.
Thank you. With the fees that are involved, not counting things like alcohol permits or tent permits or things like that, but village fees, what would be the circumstance under which fees would get waived? Who would decide that?
I would strongly I think it would have to be a circumstance, because this is kind of where we get into problems. It's when we start waiving fees. That's what's caused the problems really in the inconsistencies in the past. So if it is a village-sponsored event, where it's something that the village is initiating and the village is really taking the lead on, then probably we may not charge ourselves, or we may organize it a little differently. We will probably exclude certain things that are really not events. So if we have a legislator, Sandy Galiff wants to do a senior fair, or David Carlucci is providing some educational or outreach event, that would probably not fall into that category. So I think when it's like municipally sponsored, or there's a real interest in educating, and again, but when we start to get into the area of waiving fees, the things that come up is everybody's always got a really good reason why we should waive their fees, and that really is what got us into this mess.
And who is it that would decide that?
I think that the way it's typically done is it depends. Really, I don't know how we're writing in this. It could be the manager, or it could go to the board. But what we're trying to do is create something as turnkey as possible, so that we can really try to make it streamlined, easy, affordable, and try to minimize the reasons that we would have to waive fees or change the policy at all.
Trustee Lopez, in most of the municipalities that include the waiver language, it is generally the deciding authority, the entity that would grant the license or the permit, is the one that would have the ability to waive fees. So if it were the Board of Trustees was granting it, they could do it. If it's the police chief, which is in some places, he could do it. That's generally how it's done.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Is there a calendar of events anywhere?
We do put up events that are going on. Usually we put them up about a month, or maybe like a 2-month span of events that usually go on our weekly message and appear on different places and different calendars, social media in the village. There are some events that are sort of standing events. One of the things that the businesses asked for was an event that could be shared, so that the businesses could prepare better for the event. So actually calendars and ways of communicating with people the general public, of course, but people who are also directly impacted by events. So if they know that there's going to be a street closing, if they know that there's going to be 2 street fairs in a row, or if they know that there's going to be something going down to the riverfront, they can also adjust what they're doing to make sure that their business is less impacted. So that primarily came from the business community. One of the things we would like to hope, and one of the things that I think is starting to happen now, is more conversations about community events with business owners, getting their impact and recognizing businesses can really help facilitate great events. And even when they're at the waterfront, we've had some business participation over the summer concert series with the town. This is really what the events should be about, is again, great for the community, but if we can support local businesses too, that's really a win-win.
Got it. There are two use cases that I'm thinking of. One is I've been in the room when organizations think of a great event that they want to have, and they say, what would be a good weekend to do this? And they're checking a combination of Facebook and their memories and their calendars from the previous year to figure out what might be a free weekend. But if there were a centralized place where at least the standing events are, to know this is when the fire parade is, and this is when, you know, those kinds of things, at the very least you have an idea on the front end. And the second is, I have friends and family that I'm always trying to get to come to Ossining, and for me to say, hey, the third week of June would be a great time for you to come because there's whatever. We could create something like that. That would be fabulous. Two more, and then I'll be done. One, is this guide going to be available in Spanish?
So I can help you with a couple of those questions. So the first, where Bill and I are working right now to put the application online, and it would go through the rec center's community pass. And if it does that, then that is translated into every language, just like our website is. If someone is looking to see, at least on the event producer side, they'll be able to see what events are going on, just from that. From that standpoint, from the event producer side. For you as someone in the community, right now we don't translate the web blast because the content is driven by the community. So if the community, we can ask them to send it in, but there's a lot of nuances to it for translation that it's not something that right now I could do in a Google Translate. That's something that we could talk about. It's a free service, so that would probably require the fee of having someone to do that. It is, I can find out from Constant Contact if that's something that they do, if they can translate it, if that helps for you. And for I don't know if that answers the last two questions together.
For sure. Certainly. The more in Spanish, the better. So that would be great. And just so I understand the mechanics, is this something that folks would fill out online and submit online?
For the application, yes. That's something that we're working on right now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Welcome. Okay.
Who's next?
Rika? No?
Go ahead, Manny. You unmuted yourself first. Go ahead.
I unmuted and yeah, sorry.
Go ahead,
Are you
Rika.
on or am I on?
Go ahead, Rika. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so I have a bunch of stuff. First of all, thank you all for working on this. I think we've been discussing this on and off, I don't know, probably 4 years. I think it might be longer than that. So kudos to all the research, because it's no longer just opinions. Now we can actually have many pages. I think it's a 10-page document. So many pages to read through and get a lot of information, a lot of research. So thank you for all the work that you guys did. So I'm going to start at the top, go macro to micro. So the first thing I think, Karen, I heard you said, this is the purpose of events. It's a business development. I think some people would say it's just fun. Some people will say it's a way for organizations to spotlight themselves, could be another reason. Point being, I think we do have to do a little mission statement, something that actually says what the purpose of these things are. Because when you have a purpose could be, we want to be known as the village in the Hudson Valley that has the most events every weekend. It's fun. It's great for the community. It promotes Ossining. Other places might say, we're only going to do things 10 weeks, 10 Sundays out of, New York City has very clearly delineated that they use one avenue every weekend. I mean, if you can figure out their calendar, you would have seen by now that they do an Avenue a weekend and certain blocks throughout Manhattan. And they're very specific about it being certain days of the week and where farmers markets are allowed. I mean, it's very delineated well in advance. And a lot of them are every year the same sort of group runs it. So it can be very defined. It could, and they don't want more. You know, they're not aiming for more in Manhattan. They're aiming for less. That's their goal. So I think we have to delineate what that is. And it was not clear in this study, so to speak, that we all, or people all agree on what the purpose and what the goal is. So I think at some point we should make sure we're in agreement about that. I want to point out some of the things, the desired outcomes of what we want. The other piece that I picked up that I thought was really interesting, 2 pieces that were discussed last time, was Saturdays and Sundays. And really shifting through that. By the way, I agree with everything Omar said. The calendar is a big deal. So I should have said I echo everything Omar said and continue from there, because I have calendar all over my write-ups, which I'm not going to discuss because he already did that. So I wrote down that the Saturday, Sunday, that whole deal of Saturday, Sunday is a big deal. You should not have both Saturday and Sunday being used. It clearly said in, I don't know if it was Jamie, I don't know if it's Maddie, I don't know if it's Bill wrote, Saturday or Sunday is the right way to go, and then really calendar all this stuff out. I did not see it in the write-up, but I didn't read every sentence. I remember when we interviewed somewhere, maybe Victoria would remember, somebody had once talked about some town actually having a council, an appointed council that makes the decisions about the use of public spaces for things like this, which was really sort of cool. And I think, and they're appointed. And because we have a town and we have a village and we have parks that are owned by both, it's just an idea. It's not mentioned in this write-up about who makes the issue about who makes the decision has now come up a couple of times in this conversation. There have been times and places where a singular person makes a decision. It has not always worked out well when one person makes a decision, neither for the person nor the community. Without getting into details, we may want to come up and explore solutions. We could tell people they have to apply for this quarterly, not on a running calendar. Everybody knows when the dates are. There's a committee. They help Bill, or maybe it's Bill, but somebody can override. I think Omar's point of about the waivers was a great question. I looked at it differently. Maybe it's not just about waivers. It's about if somebody thinks they're being treated unfairly in the sense of money. They're starting up. They don't have that kind of money. Who can help them sort of override a decision if anyone? And by the way, Karen, you're right. Once you have policies and fees, to start waiving and overriding defeats the entire purpose of having policies and fees. It is exactly what has gotten us to this place that we're in. I'm with you 100%. It's just figuring out who and what where, which I think you know. A big question mark for me was enforcement across the whole thing. Who's enforcing? How is it being done? Wasn't so much addressed, I think. And even though Stuart did a great job explaining what we might have to do, fees, policies, but at the end of the day, if there are 14 trucks and 13 vendors and they don't have everything they're supposed to, you know, it's one of those, you know, you can slap my wrist and I'll keep doing it, unless you do what some communities do, which is literally have an enforcement agency, an agent. It could be the police, it could be somebody else that tells them to shut down and leave. And they don't necessarily even go to the sponsor. So Scarsdale does that. They have somebody walking around and they check. And if you don't have what you're supposed to have, they don't go to the sponsor. They tell you to leave, and they usually ticket you right before they tell you that. So I think the whole idea of enforcement has also been a problem that I think needs to be addressed. And I don't think it's been a big problem. I think we haven't had stuff in place. So I don't know if there are answers to any of these. I'm just sort of, as you know, I sort of wrote this down as people were talking, and I just want to go through some of the stuff. The definition of events, that's tricky. So Karen, if the staff can really hone in on that. We do have religious parades. We have all sorts of stuff. I think that's a tough one to really hone in on what defines them. It's not enough to just have a legal definition. I'm sorry to say, Stuart. I think we actually have to explain to people. People don't define their events the way we define their events. And that's where I think some of the issues come up. I love all the other stuff. I think it's great. One piece that I would like to ask about. So this was sort of a list of things to think about that I'm stating. What I'd like to think about is there are many municipalities around us that no longer do events. They used to. So the study shows a lot about who's doing what. I did not, and I may have missed it, by the way. Did we look at why some communities have closed events? Why Mamaroneck no longer does their wine and whatever gourmet thing that they used to do? You know, why some municipalities, I think they don't do fireworks because they're expensive. That may have been the whole reason why we're, you know, not the only ones, but there are fewer and fewer. I bring this up because fewer communities are doing events. People from those communities are coming to Ossining. Good news, people from those communities are coming to Ossining. Bad news, some of the vendors are coming and displacing the Ossining vendors, some of the Ossining folks that want to do stuff. So the definition of who should and shouldn't do events, maybe it's everybody. It goes back to my desired outcome. Maybe it should go first to Ossining people who have businesses here, people who are part of the chamber, people who do stuff with the village. Maybe not. And that goes back to what's our desired outcomes and who are we looking at. I'm sorry for taking up the microphone so long, but it's a long study. I had comments that I'd written down that I wanted to throw out there. And since it's recorded, you can all look at it later.
These are really great comments, though, so thank you, Trustee Levin. One of the things that our new planner, Jaime Martinez, who just started, who unfortunately, he literally just started last week, and he ended up being quarantined for a few days, so we weren't able to get him as fully involved in this as we'd like to. But prior to coming here, he was the executive director of the BID in Yonkers. So he actually raised some of these issues too about how we can do events more strategically and how we can make sure that they're effective. Because although we did not speak to it in the report, what we heard from anecdotally from different communities who didn't, stop doing events was kind of like it was costing a lot of money and there wasn't a lot of benefit of maybe the event itself or the, but in some cases it was causing a drain on resources. So there's a couple of things. I think in defining events too, it comes back to what people are asking the community to do, the municipality to do, and that gets back to the fees, because the other thing that we didn't mention earlier is that one of the reasons that it's important to have some base of fees for things is because we are talking about taxpayer dollars, not our dollars. And whether different events, all events are, event organizers believe their events are good and reflect good things for the community. However, we do have to make sure that we err on appropriate use of government funds in terms of what we're doing, and that's a really important consideration. So, but I thank you for these comments, because I do think that as we do this process, looking at having a task force or a council who can help shape this is something we would consider, we should consider, and also really looking at what we want these events to be and what are our primary goals in having these events. And for things that have maybe other goals, whether they're religious processions or things that are maybe a bit more specific, then I think we have to also communicate fair parameters around what that means for our community too.
If I could, thank you, Karen. I missed one note. I flipped the page when you were talking. In one of the bullet points, it talks about how the parks are underutilized. I don't think it was meant to say they're underutilized. I think it was meant to say it could be an option to have these events. Not everything has to be in the middle of the village. But I would like to, when we look at parks, parks are designed for people to sort of play with their kids, walk with their parent, you know, help a person in a wheelchair have a place to go to that's peaceful. So when we look at parks, I think we have to be, I am a big proponent of using our parks mostly because they're parking and they allow our business area to conduct business. But also, we have to be so careful because frankly, I think our parks are actually highly used. And we want to make sure that that's taken into consideration. And that's just a balancing act. But the way it's written with the implication that the parks are underutilized, but I don't think that's, I think we might want to change a couple of words there because this has become a public document at some point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Quesada, you're up.
All right, thank you. So I'm not going to repeat what Omar said. I agree with that. I think that's something that we talked about many years ago and sharing some of that stuff. I agree with Rika as well. So I'm going to go into I just have a quick question, I guess, for Bill. You mentioned something about the fees to utilize parks. Can you explain that to me? What do you mean with that?
Sure. So if you were going to do an event at Henry Gordine, there is not a fee to use that park. There's no established approved fee for that. Unlike if you were doing an event at Peekskill at their waterfront park, they have an established fee to use that park. So that's something that we might want to consider. The only fees that we have are for ball field rentals.
Okay. So we find out that last year in regards to that, but it's only one park. It's not parks. So you were very so you are talking about just a particular park, not if I wanted to do a Nelson Park something, you know, as a fee or some sort of, you know, if they're having a ball game there, is that something, you know, like the school is doing something in there? Is that something that you're thinking of also charging them?
Well, it's something to consider. So if, you know, if you were going to do, let's say, an event in Peekskill, it's going to cost you a lot more money because there's park fees as well as whatever other fees they're charging compared to doing an event in Ossining, where if somebody wanted to use Nelson, we don't have a fee for Nelson Park. We don't have a fee for if you want a Nelson Sitting Park to do your event in. We just have the ball field fees. So when someone wants to do an event at Nelson Park, right now, there's nothing that we charge them. They just do their event if it's approved.
So I guess that's something that we can talk about a little more detail on that area, because there's some parks where you have a barbecue pit where in the summer, you know, a family can go there, and if they're not aware, you know, they just use it. And it kind of goes back to a little bit of what Rika was mentioning, you know, it's enforcement. How do we enforce something like that? If we have, do we have you talking about like if it's a gathering of people using this particular barbecue area in there, in those parks that we have, this I believe is 2 or 3. We have that. Do we charge a fee?
We do have if there is a gathering of more than 20 people using a park, they do need a permit.
Correct. But what happens if I am by my family and I'm not aware of that fee and I just go to the park?
Right. We don't have the enforcement.
Okay.
To, you know, we have a part-time park ranger that works during the summer months. We've had people who are on the fields without permits that have more than 20 people, and he will go and remind them of what the rule is and to contact the recreation office.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of go back to a little bit of the, I guess, the special event permit fees that you guys are proposing. So, and so there's a standard fee, $25 for any application, correct?
Correct.
So, and then if I wanted to close the street, then it's $25 plus $10 for each spot that we are closing in that particular street.
Right. That was something that we found in was it a couple other communities, Jamie?
It was specifically Mamaroneck. They, when they have street events, because the street parking is really guaranteed usually when there's no event for the local businesses, that they took a look to see how much money they were going to lose, and they actually charge our fee. The $10 is, if we took a look at on average between Monday through Saturday, it ends up being about $10 a day. Theirs was a $25 fee per spot that was taken out because they lose $25 a day. So, that it anchors to the revenue lost.
In that regards, talking about, what happens if people want to use the parking lot right next to, the post office or Market Square area where we are losing a greater amount of parking? Is that something that is not taken in consideration if that's the case?
That's considered well, it's written as metered, but it can be metered or permitted.
Maddie, maybe do you want to talk a little bit, because we're going to be changing the metering system too. So
No, that's I'm just going to go from what, one of the I guess it's just interesting the portions of how this whole thing is break down. One of the things that I had a question with, and is the last event when we're talking about 500 people and more, and then we only have 2 park / recreation employees, 2 officers, and OBAC. Just as a coordination, is that something that has happened? We only have 2 people of each department?
Well, I can tell you from, say, for instance, the Big Ass Barbecue, I know that we did have a parks person, but they worked down there. They didn't have to pay anything separate because that person was working during their regular business time. So there's that, but I don't think we had OVAC. I don't think we had police officers there, but it's something that during the stakeholder meeting we had with the OEM group, they had asked for that. They thought that it was important for that to be a component, that there has to be triggers, that if there's certain numbers of people that are going to be congregating in one space, that there needs to be certain village employees that are there on site and available.
So is that 2 employees per department for these 2 particular departments, I guess, minimum, I'm assuming? Because if I'm looking at a village fair, we have more than 2 police officers, correct?
Yeah, and DPW and park staff.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be minimum.
Okay, so that's something that we have to make sure that that's somewhere between the lines in here, because I just don't want to have, if we're going to.
That's written in here. It does say that for certain events that the recreation superintendent will set the fees. So if there's additional fees, that it does give the opportunity, if there are additional fees that we feel that need to be charged, that they let them know, and we can itemize it for them to know what they would have to pay.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, quick question. And part of what you said earlier was that, I believe, you said it has to be, these events have to have a component of a nonprofit organization sponsoring this, or something along those lines where, if there's money raised or there's money gained, they have to present that to a nonprofit organization. Can you delineate that? Can you be a little more specific? And is that something that we are proposing?
I think he's just saying that that's what exists in some communities.
Some communities. So, but that's not what we are looking to do here.
No, I found it. I found it out in the Hamptons. Let me leave it at that.
Got it. All right.
Can we find a community more different from Ossining than the Hamptons?
Sure.
No, I couldn't actually, to tell you the truth.
We looked.
No, actually, I think every community is doing the right thing. They look at what their purpose of all these events, and they then create the policy. I mean, I think it actually makes sense for them. For us, we should be looking, I think what I think what you're getting to is some of the sort of costs and revenue issues, and what the minimum requirements are going to be, and the issues that we have with non-for-profits who then subcontract to for-profits.
Correct. Yes, thank you, Rika. Yes, that's exactly, along those lines. That's where I want to get a little bit more information. I mean, this is a great starting point for me in seeing a lot of the stuff that I haven't seen in years. Obviously, putting a figure number on $83,000, 500, that we do go through and as a part of a budget and a year. So it's very interesting just to see. But there are other events, nonprofit, I guess, events that they do have some sort of sponsorship where they do donate their money to other, to nonprofit organizations as well. I'm not, and that's what was interesting. But thank you for this. There's a lot of information I think that we should look into with more detail. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Can
Okay.
I just ask, once I know, Victoria, you have a bunch, I just want to ask one question. Do we ever allow, or I think we do actually, I just didn't see it in this. We did talk about weekends, but events and stuff during the week. I know if it's like a July 4th in the middle of the week, of course, that's obvious. Those are holidays. It's just not stated clearly that's sort of a given. But do we allow people to do events any day of the week? Like if they want to do a Wednesday night, we do, right? There's no difference, is there, between a weekend and a weekday?
Not really. I mean, in the summer we do, they're village sponsored events, so they're concerts, so that's a little different. But, again, people could do events. Again, the consideration would be what the impact would be on the community, the businesses, and everything else.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Victoria.
Not at all, not at all.
I just had a quick question. I'm sorry about this. So, a march, something with someone wants to do for something that happened and they want to do a march. I know that the village board changed the policy a couple of years back in regards to that as a managerial, I think, position. How does that work? Is that part of this whole special events or totally separate?
We are looking at how to put, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Karen.
We are looking at creating, they're part of the event framework. So parades, processions, how we would handle some of the parades versus others. We're kind of looking at, you do get into some tricky areas. But again, when we're looking at things, particularly things that are driven by private organizations, not sort of municipal events like a fireman's parade, you really are talking about something where you're using village resources to, close roads and do other things. And while that may not be necessarily a bad thing to do, for the village to do it with no consideration of reimbursement for those services, then we have to look at it as an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars.
So we may be changing that policy, that the board, or modifying a little bit the policy that was created a couple of years back?
I think it would just be modifying the fees associated with those things. I don't think it would be changing the ability to do those things. I think it would be associating fees with things that are currently not charged.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, so we have 3 hours that we can talk on this meeting, and we're already an hour and a half in. And I have like a page of questions, so I'm going to rattle them off as quickly as I can. And I do think this is the heaviest item for discussion this evening. And had I been thinking about it, I would have asked Larissa to do the kiosk thing first.
Yeah.
So Larissa, if you can hear us, you turned off your video so that you didn't have to be on video watching us talk about something else. We will invite you back in as soon as we're done with this so that you can move on with your evening. Thank you for your patience. Oh, yeah. Hi, Larissa. I'm glad to know you can hear us. We will call out your name as soon as we're done here, and we'll go right to you next. Thank you so much.
We've moved you up in the queue.
Yes, we are
I
very,
put the
very
kids to
excited
bed while listening, so I'm multitasking over here.
Excellent.
It's all
We're
good.
very excited to talk about your item. It's a good one.
No
It's a
worries.
fun one. So thanks so much for spending your evening listening to us. Okay, so Jamie, Bill, Karen, whomever, and Stuart. So there's some of my questions are like tiny detail ones, and some of them are bigger. So you have the 3 different standards of anything smaller than 200 people anticipated, then between 200 and 500 people, and then greater than 500 people. Is that fee, I assume, is paid in advance with a prediction of how large the event would be? If an event is surprisingly larger than anticipated, will we send you a bill afterwards?
Yes.
Okay. And you will be expected to pay in advance.
You will be expected to pay 21 days in advance as part of the processing fee, because checks clearing and so on and so forth, but it's all in there that as part of it, that we do reserve the right to charge them after.
All right. Speaking of fees, Karen, you and I had talked about this in an earlier iteration of this conversation. Obviously, this is not the year we expected it to be for anyone, and we're going to have probably fewer events, and certainly they will take place in a condensed calendar year, and everyone is financially not at all where we thought we would be. So while there are some really important procedural insurance-related recommendations that are part of this application, and I love so much of the streamlining idea of having the event organizer to be able to do the application and then have them handle everything under their umbrella. I think that will streamline things and things like that. And having the insurance, is 2020, are we treating it as a fee-free year with a notification that 2021, these will be the fees that are imposed?
So that's a good question. We had told some of the event organizers that were planning events that now may or may not happen that we would be looking at fees. The fees that we're proposing are pretty reasonable. We can talk about that more as the situation progresses. I don't think any of the fees we're proposing stops any of the events that are typically done in Austin from happening. Most of them can be recouped pretty easily through sponsorship. I still think that we have to be very concerned with the fact that we have been supporting things that we really should not have necessarily been supporting with taxpayer dollars. I think that's an important consideration. So while I know that we don't want to put anybody, we don't want to create a difficult situation for anybody, if a group if private sector organizations decide they want to do an event, that's really their marketing function, and it's not an appropriate use of government funds to support that. I think that there are ways, again, if they're not really using that many resources, there's ways we can scale that back, but we have to just really walk that line of appropriate use of government resources.
Okay, I think that's a larger conversation that maybe we can have offline, because it's very specific thing, and I'm only talking about this year as perhaps an economic.
If we want to maintain again the fees that we're charging are pretty nominal considering based on some of the sizes of the events. And I'm speaking to this as a nonprofit that was a $2 million nonprofit that ran events that would not have balked at any of these fees. That would not have prohibited us from doing an event. So I think that they're fair, and I think we can get to that. We can certainly look at things that make sure that we are able to make things easier for people and make sure that we have events during a difficult time. But again, we do have to have some criteria about what is an appropriate village, use of resources and what's not. That's more of the issue than the cost.
Absolutely. I certainly understand what you're saying. I'm just curious how many businesses will exist at the end of this, so we can talk about it.
Well, but there's also things too that we can think of in ways of doing also village sponsored things too. So I think there's a lot of ways that we've already, this is a tangentially related issue, but there is a group of people who are working on short-term and sort of longer-term economic development initiatives and revitalization initiatives for small businesses. And maybe there is ways for Village to participate in things like that that can then engage businesses where we're not, you know, where we really are doing truly Village-sponsored events around that.
Okay. Larissa, I'm gonna take you off video for the rest of this conversation, just because, unless you wanted to contribute to it, but which you can. Anyway, there we go. It just makes it bigger photos for us, and we get to be the Brady Bunch 9 for the rest of this conversation. I also wanted to reference back to, we were talking about the different types of fees related to parking spots and or related to park fees. The metered spots, charging the $10 for each metered or municipal spot, however it's defined, and we realize that that's a little fluid because we're looking into a new metering system, so that could be a little bit of a different picture by next year anyway. By charging that fee when there is a program that is going to be closing down a street, that is really an impact fee on the businesses that are going to be impacted. It's a de facto impact fee. I realize it's tied to revenue, which would be more consistent and will be more consistent when we have accurate functioning meters. But it also acts as an incentive for organizations to consider some parks that might be appropriate for their event, whether it's the waterfront, whether it's Nelson Park, Nelson Sitting Park, which doesn't get utilized for a lot of events, but could function well, perhaps. So I think we have to decide, you know, what it is we're trying to encourage people to consider. When I was looking, I'm sure that there is more detail than is provided in the spreadsheet summary that you all included with the several municipalities where you did the information about where there are park fees, and most of the park fees aren't very specific in the list because it's probably more detailed depending on what park it is in each community. But I'm hesitant to increase park fees for publicly accessible events, and we do have some park fees for events that are you know, like in the town where there's pavilions. Do we have pavilions in the village? I'm trying to think if we have a pavilion in the village. Okay, so but if you're renting what we have in the community center, which is not a park, but if you're renting the pool for a pool party, that's a private event. The public's not invited to go to my 6-year-old's swim party, but you pay a fee to be able to have access to that public amenity. That is a different conversation about fees, I think, than when you're talking about an organization of whatever kind seeking to have access to public property, whether it's you know, a park or a street. So I kind of want to leave the park fees for those private sort of events on a different, you know, put a pin in it and have a different conversation about that if we could. And I think we need to decide, are we trying to encourage event organizers to consider using parks because there are positives and negatives to every event and every location, and there are people who are going to be thrilled about it being in one place and really annoyed about it being in that place. So we understand we're trying to maintain the balance. If we have decided that we have greater concerns and we would like to about events taking place so frequently in particularly the downtown, where we have street closing that has a direct impact on the viability of so many businesses in downtown, if we want to incentivize people to consider other locations, then that wouldn't make sense to add a park fee on top of that. It would discourage people from going to the park fee. So that's my feedback on that, and you know, it's one of the considerations that we have on the list. And we talked about other additional permits. We do have tent permit required. There's no actual application. There's no, you know, it's if we're going to require the tent permits, which sometimes have, and it seems like we need to, by code, for tents of a certain size, we need to have an application that is for that and is very clearly for that, which doesn't exist right now. The insurance, we have a $3 million aggregate, I think, that's being recommended. I see that Pleasantville also has a $3 million aggregate, whereas Mamaroneck and Croton have a $2 million aggregate, and then the others that you researched, I don't know, they just said that they require insurance, and I don't know what the level is. Where did we come up with the 3 million as opposed to other communities that are doing 2 million?
Stuart and I met with our insurance agent, and that was put in place so that all of the vendors that are participating in an event don't need to get insurance. So it made it so that the event producer is responsible for all of their vendors, and then if they would like on their own independently to ask their vendors to get insurance, they can. But the way that it seemed like a huge chore for all of the local community members that were participating in all of our local events to get that separate insurance. So it's something that the insurance company felt made the village whole.
Okay.
And it saves them, each of the vendors, a tremendous amount of money.
Along those same lines, we talked about hold harmless language. And I think I'm understanding that if that's going to be included as part of the application, that the hold harmless will be signed by the event organizer, not by every participant, every vendor,
Exactly.
every performer. Okay.
Yeah.
I do want to get back to something that one of my colleagues was mentioning, going back to public use of, let's say, particularly Market Square, to have a rally that would be under the category of political free speech. Are we charging people to have a rally to talk about, citizenship, DACA? I mean, we've done things like that, and we the only time we've ever, if somebody's going to use a microphone, they have to get a permit, but I don't believe that we've had fees involved.
Mayor, let me just answer it this way. What I would like to include in the ordinance would be something that I did find in a number of municipalities, which is where they define essentially, let's call it an assembly for an expressive speech purpose. And essentially what it's defined as is something that would be, that the sole purpose of that particular event is to espouse a particular, political or whatever point of view. Which guarded by both the New York State and the federal Constitution. In those municipalities where that type of event is taking place, there is no fee charged.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I ask a
The
question?
only thing
about
what they
that?
sometimes require is that depending on the number of people who may be attending, they obviously want to they'd like the organizers to let the municipality, be it most particularly the police, know, so that if there's going to be potentially a closing of a street or anything like that. But generally for that, they are not imposing a fee.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Rika?
Can I ask just a point of clarification? So people who are, in your example, are elected officials, but people running for office also use that space. So it's only for people who are elected officials. Is that right?
No, the definition of the expressive free speech, which is in some of these municipalities, doesn't even mention electeds or non-electeds.
Okay, so it's anybody that's
Yes.
making political. But I guess the differentiation that I thought maybe I heard you before, Stuart, is using in a larger category is the issue that even when we've had legislators and whatever, our community, the rec and parks sets up tables so they can serve coffee, chairs. So I heard earlier that we should not be using public funds to use tables, chairs, etc. So does that work for this category as well?
Well, what I would say, Trustee Levin, is that in looking at these other municipalities, it does not appear that what they're looking at is where someone would be setting up tables and chairs to sort of hand out literature, but essentially someone, just, having a group of people around and, talking on a particular topic or something like that. So Now, there again, depending on the number of people, you may need a police presence or some public safety
Right.
presence. But
Right.
it does not look like, from what I'm reading on these, where someone is, setting up tables and chairs and things like that.
Okay,
I
Thank
think
you.
that if that were to be done, you might have to look at it in a somewhat different light.
okay, thank you.
And the only other thing that's on here that has a question mark on it is if we should charge an alcohol fee. Your research has determined that most local municipalities do not charge for filing a permit to have alcohol at an event. We do, for the first time that we were aware of. That became a question, and we did follow what is currently in our code. If we decide that we do not want to have that going forward, or if we want to change it so it's not just parks, but it's all village property. Most large events do have alcohol at them, not all. Most smaller events may not. But the question is, I guess, should this be charged? And I think that's on the list of, it sounds like we have a number of updates that we would need to put into place legislatively before we can fully move forward with this. That's the end of my question, Stuart.
I could say that, just Mayor, what I could say is this: with regard to the alcohol, what most of the municipalities I researched do is that if alcohol is to be served, there has to be an additional level of insurance provided with regard to, alcohol liability. But other than that, they're not imposing a fee specifically for using, for the sale or distribution of alcohol on municipal-owned property.
Are you referring to they have to get permission from the SLA? Because I know there's a permit process through the
all
state.
of them say they must comply with the SLA rules and regulations. They have to do that. And they, in most places, require an additional $1 or $2 million of insurance coverage, specifically because alcohol is being served at the event. That would really be more on the vendor, not the vendor. That'd be more on the sponsor. But that is something which most municipalities do require.
On top of a $3 million aggregate.
Yes.
Would that make us the highest?
I would have to go check. If we put in, I'd have to see what the numbers would work out to be. Some put it at, would come close to $4 or $5 million in total if you're actually doing, if you're doing alcohol. But I can go through that for you because I have that in all the statutes.
Okay, I wouldn't want us to be at the top of
No, I understand. I understand.
our demands for as much as we need to be protected. I don't want us to be at the top because we're
Gotcha.
that's one of the things that's different about us and the Hamptons. Okay, I think that's my list of questions. Is there anything else you want to share with us on events?
If I could add, Karen, if you could add this to the list. So when people behave badly, it's beyond enforcement. So I don't know if any community does it because I sort of went back while you guys were talking to look at the document. So if we have a sponsor who doesn't follow the rules, things happen, whatever that may be, there needs to be something in place that says, in my opinion, and you might disagree, and if you're putting a group together, but an idea would be that they don't get a permit the following year.
I agree.
Well, thank you. We're done. Check that off.
I just want to clarify. We're talking before we close this issue and move on to the very exciting RFQ on the kiosk, which is probably going to be less than an hour and a half discussion. We have all of these fees. We're kind of thinking of fairs and festivals is mostly what we're talking about. We've made reference to a couple of parades like the fire parade, which is municipal. But what about processions that might have more than 500 people at them and would involve, partial temporary closing of streets? Are these fees applicable to any parade of that nature?
Yes.
Okay. Then Larissa, come back and join us. Come back on screen. Oh, good. You can do it yourself. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi.
So thank you so much for joining us, Larissa. I don't know, should I just send it over to Maddie? Maddie, do you want to?
Sure.
give a
Sure.
little introduction here? We're so excited about this.
Yes, us too. Good evening, everybody, members of the board, Bill, Larissa, Stuart. So I am just going to give a really quick overview of what the process has been to this point, and then I am going to hand it over to Larissa. Is anyone else getting an echo, or is it just me?
So I think that you might be are you near a computer or laptop and an iPhone sitting next to each other?
No?
No, that sometimes creates the echo effect.
Oh, I don't know. Okay, I moved my Android phone away from me. Okay, so we put out an RFP for the kiosk at Henry Gordon Park in early February. This was a building that was built as sort of an addition to the Harbor Square property. And oh, everyone's leaving. Is it something I said?
Yes.
But it's about ice cream.
You should have started with ice cream.
I know, I'm sorry. So this is a building that's been vacant since Harbor Square was constructed. And we worked on getting an RFP out in the first week of February. We received the results back the first week in March. And after sharing these details with the board unanimously selected Larissa and Stephen Jardine, who submitted for Bigfoot Creamery, which is going to be an artisanal, locally sourced ice cream vendor for the kiosk at Henry Gordon Park. So we are not going to talk about sort of the terms because we're still waiting to convene with the Jardines and with Corporation Counsel Kahan to sort of go over the finer points, many of which we did discuss when the board met about this in executive session. But Larissa, I'll turn it over to you if you want to kind of give us the high points on this super exciting, delicious sounding project.
I'd be happy to. We are so excited. This is kind of our first venture outside of our kind of normal day jobs. So we are jumping in with everything we have. For just a bit of background, we started Bigfoot Creamery last year, September, October of last year. We've been operating out of Bethany Arts Community since then, and they've been amazing partners with us on allowing us to use their kitchen as a shared kitchen space to make our ice cream. And then we've been selling it at events that have been happening at Bethany Arts Community. So it's been a great way for us to kind of test flavors, like work out the kinks with kind of how to make ice cream, and really narrow down our vendors of who we want to partner with locally to really make some of the best ice cream with really local ingredients. That's the key here. So we are partnering with Hudson Valley Fresh. They are based up in Poughkeepsie, but it's a co-op sort of business. So they partner with a bunch of dairy farms around the Hudson Valley, and then they process all of the milk in one facility. But they've been a great partnership for us so far. So we'll be using their dairy, and then we're really going to look to source local seasonal produce from around here. So Fable Foods, all the local farms, to really bring it back to Austining. Really, that's really the whole point here, is just to try to keep it as much like within Austining and the local area as possible. So the name is Bigfoot Creamery. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and so Bigfoot's always been kind of a big part of my childhood and my life. And plus the name was available, which I was shocked at, so I had to take it. And we have a website, bigfootcreamery.com, if you guys want to go on and check it out now. What else? Stephen and I moved here about 4 years ago. We have 2 children, so we're very involved in the community. And my son is at Park School now, so we're getting into the school system. So we're here for good. We love Austining, we love the community, and we're just so excited to become bigger part of the community, really. So as far as the kiosk goes, we were hoping for May 1st or open date. That's very much up in the air right now. So there's a lot we need to work out in terms of open date, and it's kind of going to probably be a as we go kind of situation, but hopefully we'll be open by Memorial Day. I think everybody would really appreciate that. So that's Stephen and I's goal, is to really be open by Memorial Day. The idea is to be open from May through October 1st. So it's going to be a seasonal business in the summertime only. And then the initial hours, which are also subject to change depending on kind of volume. You know, I think a lot of us really don't know what the volume is going to be in terms of traffic down there on the weekdays and the weekends in the summer. So for now, it's going to be Wednesday through Sunday. We're going to be open. Wednesday and Thursday is going to be from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then Friday through Sunday is going to be 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then some of the holidays will be open later and longer hours. And we'll be there for the food trucks on Fridays. You know, any additional events will be open for longer hours if needed. What else? Let me see if I'm missing anything. I think I covered kind of the main points. Did I miss anything, Maddie?
No, I think, you know, we had a couple of questions, things that we were going to hammer out sort of internally. You know, as you mentioned, we talked about some Mondays. We have the jazz series down there in Gordine Park, so that might have been an opportunity to open up for extended hours. We're all dying to try the ice cream. I know Trustee Levin had tried it and gave it rave reviews. So we're all excited about that. But I wanted to ask you, like, what are your favorite flavors?
Oh my gosh. Well, the gingerbread I made over the holiday season was my personal favorite. I actually made a ton of ice cream. We were supposed to meet in person that Monday, so I was like slaving away making ice cream all weekend.
Oh no! Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, it's in the freezer and at Bethany Arts, waiting to be eaten. So I played around with honey lavender, which is like a springtime flavors. And then what else did I make? Honey lavender. Chocolate seems to be the most like favorite from the kids. Like they all just want chocolate.
Classic.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, I'm like blanking on all the ice cream I made at Bethany Arts.
Well, I'll just say, you know, I do still go out and do errands. So if you've got a freezer at Bethany that needs to be distributed to all the people that are on the screen right now, I am open for deliveries. So you just let me know if that should happen.
Task rabbit.
Yes. Maddie, you collect addresses, and I'm also happy to make it.
No move.
Yeah, we can make it happen for sure.
Awesome.
So I think sort of the next step before we take any questions, we have been working with Joe Augustinelli in the building department to sort of hammer out what we need to get done with the Department of Health, as well as to get some signage permits going. So hopefully once we have a chance to breathe and get into a rhythm here of the new normal, we should be able to make contact with the Department of Health and see if there's anything that they can help us prepare for remotely, and then the signage, and then get some benches and garbage pails down there, and then we should be ready for you, I would think.
Yeah, I think for me, the Department of Health is the biggest question mark for me right now, is just starting some of those conversations to figure out what needs to get done in there to get it to the point that we need it to open. So I think for all of us, that's kind of the biggest outstanding thing we need to start having conversations around. But then once we figure that out, you know, we'll start buying equipment and installing it, the freezer, the fridge, and then also what kind of seating we can do outside of the kiosk, which is that going to be the same people we talked to about the signage?
Sure thing. That's going to be Joe and his staff. Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, hopefully we can put some nice chairs and tables out there. Like it'd be a great place for people to hang out right by the playground. Potentially a Bigfoot statue if they let me, but
yes, please.
A big, good picture opportunity. You know, we can publicize Austining. Yeah, that sounds good. All sounds good.
Good, Rika.
No, I was just gonna say I met you. I think you have either an Irish setter or right. You have a dog that you were there at Bethany Arts, I think. The day that I tasted all the ice cream, and we started a conversation. So when Maddie told me you called and everything, I was very excited because it was actually delicious. So we really want to welcome you both as a new neighbor to the community. 4 years is still sort of relatively new, but we're better than the Pacific Northwest. So I'm just going to say you've chosen the right place.
Yeah, no, I think the weather here is better, that's for sure. So thank you, Rika. I remember our conversation. Yeah, it was at the Arttoberfest, right? At
Yeah,
Bethany Arts.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that was a great event. They're doing some great stuff over there.
Yeah, they are. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bill,
Yeah,
is there any? Bill, the kiosk is in Henry Gordian Park. Henry Gordian Park is our newest park. It's got a little bit of a different relationship. It was the most recently constructed through a public-private partnership, and there is a relationship with Ginsberg Companies that has some responsibilities and others that are village responsibilities. Could you just clarify for us what that general relationship is, and then what's relevant particularly to the kiosk and our new anticipated vendor?
So they take care of all the park maintenance. And I know, and Stuart, we've talked about this, they're in the agreement that was part of the deal when it was constructed, is the village takes over that maintenance in a few years. So I'm not sure when that occurs. So they handle all the maintenance. When we do have issues, we speak with them. They're very, they get back to us. They take care of the issues. We do have to figure out a couple things about access for like electric and those things. And I know Maddie's aware of those issues, but we'll work all those things out. They're easily, I think we'll easily take care of them.
Okay.
One of the issues that's related to how enjoyable it will be to sit right outside that kiosk and enjoy some ice cream this summer is we've had irrigation system issues in the park that have some chronically spongy, extra moist lawns, even when it's not related to a recent rainfall. That's something that I don't know where we left it at the end of last season, or where we are in preparing for it this season. I realize it's not a normal year, but I want to make sure that that is on the radar and that there's a plan for fixing all of that, so that our parks, all the grass is welcoming and not compromised by a damaged irrigation system.
Yeah, we've asked that we can get our park staff so they can start training our guys so that we know where things are, because we'll be taking over the park, so we need to know how the irrigation system works, and we can be more educated on how it's going. And maybe they don't have the timer set right, and we can add some input into that to make it a little better.
Okay, it's not timers. It's not that things are being overwatered. It's the ground has some problems. I think there's repairs that need to be done, and that would be on the backs financially of GEC. Am I correct in this, Stuart?
You are, Mayor.
Okay. I don't want it to be dismissed as it's being overwatered, because that's
Okay. Yeah, I know that there was.
I'm quite sure that it's not just overwatered.
Okay, I know that there was not last year, but the year before, there was some damage to it. They had put up a tent down there, and they had hit the irrigation system, and those were fixed. But once when they turn it on again this year, we'll certainly take a look at that then and see what's going on.
Okay, great, thanks. So Larissa, this is terrific. We're very excited. The timeline, I know everybody wants to move forward as quickly as possible so that everybody can enjoy delicious ice cream while you watch the sunset when you're, allowed to gather with friends. That'll be really great someday, whether it's Memorial Day weekend or not, I don't know. And I imagine that the county's Department of Health is a little busy these days. So you'll just keep us posted. Maddie will keep us posted, I imagine, on how this is progressing. Maddie, Larissa, Karen, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we have in mind?
Can I just ask one more little piece?
Yeah.
Oh, of course, Omar.
Yeah. Larissa, thank you so much for joining us and for bringing this to our community in a big way. My question is about merch. Is merch part of the vision for this? Because I want to represent what you are doing.
You bring up a very good point. Thank you. We're working with Laura Lee now here in Ossining to get some shirts printed. So talked to him earlier today, and we've got some costs, and I'm gonna start printing those. And yeah, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and that'll be the best way to know when you can buy shirts and baseball caps. And thank you for supporting us. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I'm here to ask the tough questions. You're welcome.
And this is why, you know, Stephen and I are so excited. It's just such a great business that's really bringing a lot of happiness to our community. So yeah, that's all I've got. I don't think there's anything else that we missed that I can think of.
Karen, it seems that you were about to contribute something.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Larissa. Next, we have another initiative that we have that we're moving forward on is the Youth Bureau, the establishment of a Youth Bureau. And this is something, again, we've been working on for a while. Bill Garrison's done a lot of work on this. We're working with the county to establish this. Again, it's the first youth bureau to be established in the county in quite some time. So I'd like to turn this over to Bill Garrison to talk about where we are right now and what the next steps are. We may have a little bit of delays due to the current situation, but I do think it's something that we can continue to move forward. So with that, Bill Garrison.
All right, thank you again. So we submitted an application to the Westchester County Youth Bureau for opening a youth bureau in Ossining. The county received the application, and they're just as excited as we are and very supportive of our application. The application was scheduled to be discussed at the Senior Youth and Intergenerational Committee with the Director of the Youth Bureau and County Legislator Catherine Borgia on March 18th last week. Unfortunately, that meeting was canceled due to the current events. And in speaking with the County Youth Bureau Director, Dr. Harris, she's indicated that she has approved the application. It just needs to go through the committee and then to the legislatures. At this point, she doesn't have a timeline when that will be brought up again. We'll keep checking back. And in the meantime, some of the work that we've been doing is we have prepared job descriptions. We have 2 positions that are budgeted, the executive director and a senior youth worker. These positions will need to get approval from Westchester County Civil Service. And before we can post, recruit, or hire for these positions, unfortunately, we have to get the approval from the county. So that's kind of holding us up a little bit on that end. At this point, we can begin work on developing language for a local law that would create the Ossining Youth Bureau and Youth Board. There is a requirement that a youth bureau must have a youth board, and our corporation council has identified laws from other municipalities that will be helpful as we develop these bylaws, and we can use these other municipalities as a template so we can start to develop our bylaws. Once we have bylaws in place, we need to work on selecting a youth board. This is going to be an extremely important process because the board will be actively supporting and helping the youth bureau and guiding the youth bureau with its initiatives. We're looking to get involvement during this time as we're waiting for our application to be approved, to get involvement from stakeholders, including the school. We did have a stakeholders meeting that was scheduled to have taken place on March 18th at the Ossining Communities That Care meeting. That meeting was also postponed, and so I'm going to be working on setting up some individual calls with stakeholders and organizing a conference call with all the stakeholders so that we can get input from our community on what they would like to see from a youth bureau, and we can also update them on the status of where we are in getting the youth bureau up and going. We are recommending that the youth bureau would be housed at the community center. Our recommendation includes that the youth bureau would be a standalone department and that the executive director would report directly to the village manager. The recreation department will work closely with the youth bureau to support programs and initiatives, and I think that's going to be a very positive relationship. I think the youth bureau will be able to help support some of the rec initiatives and programs and vice versa. So that's really my update right now as for the youth bureau. Things are going well, and like some cancellations of some meetings, which might add a few delays, but I think we've got everything in a good plan going forward, and hopefully we will, in a few months, have a youth bureau in Ossining.
Wow. Okay. It doesn't sound like there's an action for us to take right now. Is there, Karen, is there anything else you want to guide us on regarding the Youth Bureau? Thank you, Bill, for getting us up to speed on all that's been happening.
Sure.
So there isn't an action to take right at this minute, but you know, again, this is something that's going to require some level of stakeholder engagement and research into looking at into you know, how we want to establish. You know, it is an entity that tends to work closely with school districts, and we have a lot of youth-oriented youth development agencies involved, you know, in Ossining who are interested in this. So while we had planned to do some in-person meetings, we will just change them to phone calls and Zoom meetings and virtual meetings, and we will continue to get that done so that when the county gets their approvals in place, we can move more quickly.
Excellent. And I do want to just call to everyone's attention. I think the Zoom is working out pretty well. It's our first time for a public meeting. We are also learning the limitations of it. There's a lot of guidelines that the state requires of us to use it. But we may be cut off at 10 p.m. for our recording of this meeting, which means we have 14 minutes to complete the rest of this meeting and be sure that we are in legal compliance. I was just communicating with Craig Cooper, and that is potentially a challenge for us. So if there's not an action for us to take on the Youth Bureau, then I'm going to suggest that we move on to, Stuart has 3 items for us. Is there anything else that's critical for us to understand about youth bureaus at this time?
No, just giving you the update on the progress
Thanks.
so far.
Thanks so much, Bill. Okay, so Stuart, what would you like to start with? I mean, the water bills is not on here. It's kind of the most interesting, I think, of the 3 items that you have to bring up to us.
Why don't I start with that one, Mayor? Thank
Great.
you. This is something that Dale brought up to Karen and myself, and the suggestion being that we defer penalties on water bills for the months of April and May, so that ordinarily the village is divided into various zones, and if you don't pay by the date your bill is due, you would be paying a 5% penalty that month and then 1% in the following months. The plan here would be that for the March bills, which were billed March 6th and are due April 5th, that if folks have not paid by April 5th, they will not have penalty. They will not be penalized as long as they pay by June the 5th. If they don't pay by June the 5th, then all the prior penalties will accrue and go back. And for the bills that are due, that will be billed April 6th and due May the 5th, they also would not have any penalty or interest till June. I should also point out, though, that for prior bills, because it's the way our system is set up, if folks have not paid their bills at this point, they too would also basically have a deferral on penalties and interest until through the 5th of June. And again, after that date, it would continue to accrue. This would primarily just help those folks who are having difficulty getting those bills paid, and would allow us to by resolution, the board would essentially defer the collection of the penalties for those 2 months.
So then my only question, and it's nice that it can be by resolution instead of legislation, so that it can happen, you know, really in just a vote of the majority, a simple majority, without a public hearing, timelines and such. We really don't know how long we'll be under a state of emergency, so I assume you're choosing a date in anticipation of us someday, you know, everybody being able to go back to work and make a living again. So that June 5th is something that if we needed to update it because we were still in this time of economic contraction, that's something that we could update with another resolution.
Completely correct, Mayor.
Okay. Is this a resolution we would be voting on today, or do we have until next week's legislative session?
I'll have it for the April 1st session.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this?
I'm all for it.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks to Dale.
Excellent,
Thank you,
excellent, excellent thoughtfulness. I'm glad we're able to move this forward. There's, only but so many opportunities where we have to try and provide people with a little bit of assistance and alleviate a little bit of the financial burden of our day-to-day expenses. And so I'm pleased to be able to do this. And we look forward to having it on the agenda next week. What's up, Stuart? What's next up?
Next, we have a tax certiorari for 172 North Highland Avenue for the grand total of $1,717.42. This is for basically tax years 2016 to 2019, and it has resulted in a consent judgment. So this is what the village would have to pay, and I would have a resolution for the board for next week.
Okay.
Okay. Last, folks, is a request, and it will be done by resolution, to issue a request for qualifications for claims management services. As I indicated in my memo to you, our current claims manager, or TPA, third-party administrator, UMR, has indicated they are getting out of the business with regard to automobile and general liability, effective for the village as of August 1 of this year. And we have been in contact with our insurance broker. I was in contact with another insurance broker yesterday. We have the names of, I believe, 5 or 6 potential TPAs who we could send this out to and get their information with regard to this. Essentially, what the TPA does is to manage the various claims that we have. They set up the claim files. They set the reserves. They deal with defense counsel and deal with us as well. And they also deal with the excess insurance carrier. We pay, just so the board is aware, an annual fee to POMCO or UMR of $32,500. And as I said, we would get this out to these various companies to get their interest. I'm told by our insurance broker that there are a number that are interested in doing this business for the village. So we'd want to get a resolution before the board so we can get this RFQ out and get some responses. I should note that I have advised a UMR that given the current situation, it may well be that the village will need to go beyond the August 1st termination date. And I would expect that UMR would understand that, because they're actually terminating clients on a rolling basis. So it's not just everybody is, sunsetting on the same date. And that's the situation.
Great. Is there anything else on the agenda before I make final remarks and we have a motion to enter into executive session? Anything else people want to comment on? Okay, then before I ask for a motion, I'll just say another thank you to all of our staff, first responders, all of the essential workers who are out there, all of the nurses and doctors who are on the front lines. And thank you to everyone who is practicing social distancing. It is not easy. We know that. This is not the normal way to handle a crisis. Normally, you want to go out and be with people and feel comforted by people. And now we have to do that virtually, and we have to find new ways to help. And the good news is that crisis often brings out the best in people, and it certainly is in people in our community. And it is inspiring to see so many people looking for ways to help their neighbors, to be appreciative of everyone who is working so hard to keep us safe. And the good news is that social distancing is working. We are seeing a slowdown in the rate of infection and a slowdown in the hospitalization rate, and that's good news. We're at the forefront. We're an example for the whole country, and I'm really proud of so much of the work that I see happening every day. So thank you to everyone who is doing that incredible work, including everyone who is struggling with your own households and your own family and your own frustration with this really difficult situation. We are getting through this together, and that's exactly what we need to do. Can I have a motion for executive session for matters of personnel related to specific persons and anything else, staff?
Real estate, please.
All right.
So move.
I need a second from someone. I'm going to unmute.
Second.
Second. Well, sorry.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. With that, thank you
Aye.
very much. Thank you very much for joining us. You can join us back on a Zoom platform, something like this next week when we have our first legislative session virtually, and that'll be another fun activity to figure out. All right. Thanks so much. I'll see most of you in an off-camera meeting in a moment. Thanks so much. Bye-bye, all.